Welcome to 5 Cuts for the Skew Chisel. This class is focused on 5 basic cuts that you can do with the Skew Chisel. I brought along a selection of mine to show you different aspects of how they look. But first I need to get everything ready here. I've waxed the ways so things move smoothly. I have cleaned up the top edge of my tool rest because nicks and dinks in a tool rest are going to cause that Skew Chisel to behave in a way that will repeat these marks right onto your wood. The second thing I've done is I have gone through all of my Skew Chisels, at least the ones I brought, with my 600 grit diamond card. And I know we can go to the grinder and sharpen, and that's visible and available in some of the earlier videos. You can find that. But I'm going to just tune up with my diamond card, and that's more than enough to bring the edge back. Sharp Skew Chisels is very important. A dull or semi-sharp Skew Chisel is really hard to work with and isn't going to give you the results that you want. When it comes to stock, I'm going to suggest that you start with something really small, because the Skew Chisel will not fight you so much on things the size of a pen blank. So we're going to use things like that. And then as you begin to develop a little bit of skill and practice, you can go up to a little bit larger practice stock and ultimately up to some hardwoods like this 2x2 piece of walnut. So what I have done is brought along a whole selection of tools, and I want to show you this one as an example of a good Skew Chisel. A good Skew Chisel. A Skew Chisel made to the conformance of specifications that I prefer, okay? It has a long and short points. The long point is called the toe. This is the heel. And on the long point, the side should be dead flat. So I can lay it on the tool rest like this for one of the very basic cuts I need to make and know that it's vertical. The short heel side should be rounded because this is the direction that I will use the tool in making beads. So I need to be able to roll that smoothly around. This is the way they should be traditionally made. Some of them still come that way. Here's a smaller one done exactly correctly. I picked out one from our classroom stock and found this is one that's the way it comes commercially. It's slightly rounded on both sides. So when I stand this up on edge, I have to be very cautious to be sure that I have it vertically. So I might want to take, if this was mine, and flatten this edge, 100% flat. Slightly around down here, which makes it a little easier to roll, but maybe not as good as it could be. The other thing that Skew Chisel should have is the length of this bevel. Should be about 1.5 times the thickness of the tool. This one you can see it's pretty short, so that means it's a fairly steep bevel like that. The longer the bevel, the sharper we can get the edge. So this is probably not ground correctly. Here's a good example of one that is ground correctly. It's flat, it's rounded. The thickness here transferred to the edge, this is about 1.5 times as thick as the tool is. So the balance is about right. I find Skew Chisels are mostly a spindle used tool, and to get in close I like the handle to be relatively short so I can get over the tool and manipulate it like that. Those are made out of rectangular stock. I have a video earlier about making a round Skew Chisel. This one is really great for doing very fine detail work. This is 1/4 inch drill rod with a pretty simple plain old handle. But that's a Skew Chisel also. Yeah, it doesn't have some of the features, but it has others. So let's clear the deck. I'm going to put these out of the side here. Now, here's a Skew Chisel. It's going to be really great for doing things like trees and fence posts and things like that, but for delicate work, for me, this is not a useful tool. There are some professional turners that do some very tiny, delicate work with very large skews. But this is good to show you that not only can the edge be straight like this, it can also be radiused like this. For planing cuts, which is the first cut I'm going to show you, the radius to edge keeps these 2 points back away from the surface of the wood and less likely to get a catch. So let's do some cuts and go through the 5 basic skew chisel cuts. Can we do more things than those 5 with the tool? Absolutely, but those are the ones we're focusing on. So first thing I'm going to do is to take a piece of something that looks sort of like a pen blank. Get these out of the way. Bring up the tailstock. Not quite that tight, I want to get it centered first. And just by eye, that's good enough. Support between centers. Okay. Now the reason I'm starting with this gives me a chance to show you the very first cut, which is a planing cut. And what I'm going to do is to take one of these tools with the radius to edge and make that cut. If I was going to bring a piece of square stock around on something larger than this, I would not do this. I would do it with another tool. The pieces flying off from here can be long, and they can fly pretty far. I'm sorry for that. So basically, what I want to do is to be sure I'm hitting the tool against the wood, slightly above the center line. I've got my tool rest set in here. I'm going to hold the tool against my body. I'm going to rest it on the tool rest, and I'm going to rub the bevel, this portion of the tool right here, against the wood. It's going to bang and not cut, and I'm going to slowly raise the handle until I just get a little bit of dust. And at that point, I freeze. I lock both arms of my body, and I simply move my feet and my legs, keeping this tool straight and level. Speed's to 0, power's on. Now it's not running perfectly straight, but that's pretty good. On the tool rest. Now, I just put my hand down here, and the handle of the banjo for the lathe is kind of in my way. So I'm going to stop, flip the handle to the other side, so I have the clearance to come in here. Now we'll do it again. On the tool rest, against the wood, I'm going to raise my right hand. So I first get that cut. And at that point, freeze my body. So if you're roughing out a pen blank, this is a perfectly good way to do it. I've got very clean surfaces here where I've cut. You noticed I didn't start at the very end, because if I engage the tool here, I'm going to pull out some fibers. I don't want to do that. I want to go that away towards the end. So I'm going to switch hands. Now I'm just resting the tool against the wood, letting it cut. Now if I raise the handle too far, I'm going to get that kind of an effect. What I've done, instead of planing off these fibers smoothly like here, I have gone underneath the fibers and have really pried them up from the surface, and you can see they've been pulled away. So that's too deep of a cut. Let's clean that up. Smooth and steady. And the effect is, this is maple. And that surface is really nice. Down here I didn't get it yet, so I'm going to go this way, toward the end. Now if you own a number of skews, practice with one and get used to it, because when I change from this skew to this skew, it is going to feel different in my hand, and I'm going to have to make a few cuts with it until I get comfortable with it again. So I just switched. I'm going to do the same cut again. This one's straight. Well, you can't tell it. I can tell that it cuts differently. And I'm not pushing it through the fibers. I'm pulling it up to the edge and letting it pull itself through. Can I tell any difference between the two surfaces here where I just used this and this spot? Not a bit. Planing cut. Good for roughing out on small blanks. It's good for making a surface smooth. If you're going to do furniture where you might have a taper, this is the way to do it. If I want to taper this, I'm going to set my tool rest at a slight angle to use it to set the taper. And then, same cut. Jump, raise, there's the cut. And as you can see, I'm starting to get a slight taper, so the tapers work. Now if your tool is sharp and you cut carefully and you take light cuts, that surface is going to be like glass. Now I'm not joking when I said starting and sanding at 220 is going to be okay. Planing cut. Bevel against the wood, handle on the tool rest. I'm going to lift my right hand until I just see dust, and at that point I freeze my body. My left hand's job is just simply to keep it on the tool rest. There, just dust. And I'm getting really nice, in this case very small, nice clean shavings. So the first tool practice that you need to do is to practice the planing cut. Whatever tool you're using, anchor on the tool rest, rest the bevel against the wood, allow your right or left hand to come up until you start getting just a little dust off of the edge. Freeze this triangle. My left arm, my right arm are tight to my body. I'm forming a triangle which holds that tool very, very steady. And my movement is in my feet and in my legs. Let's cut one. Let's go to cut two. We can use the same piece of wood because it happens to be here. Let's select a different tool. This tool is much longer. As you can see, I've used it for a long time. It's probably about half its original length. But it's shaped properly, and it's perfect for doing my next cut, which is called a V cut. The V cut, I actually use this flat on the back of the tool. I'm going to rest it on the tool rest, which allows the tool to stand absolutely vertically. The long point is down, and I'm going to simply touch the long point to the wood and raise the handle, and I'm going to make a little V cut. And if I push real hard, it's not going to get deeper. It's going to stop because it's going to bury itself in the wood. Pushing harder, I can maybe burn it. Let me just make a couple of marks. As long as that handle is straight and square on the tool rest, that's not going to walk off and go wrong. Now, if it gets twisted a little bit, that's what happens. It now wants to cut a nice spiral. And I didn't cut a very big spiral, but I did cut a little bit of a spiral. What happens is this tool then gets pulled along the wood one way or the other. And when that happens, and it pulls off like this, it's because your tool was not perfectly vertical. Why would I do these marks? They might be decorative. They may be layout marks for a project. They may be the home for a burning wire if you're going to be decorative that way, because now I can set the wire in that little groove and it won't roll into another place. Used a lot in pen turning and other projects where I want to put decorative marks. Now, when I did that cut, I can feel with my finger that I actually have raised the grain very slightly on both sides. Looking for my little sanding pad here. Takes a very light touch, but I need to break that back down again. So now I have a smooth surface, and that wood that was rolled up has been taken down. This is very, very fine. And for my burning marks, hasn't damaged them at all. So cut one, planing. Cut number two is the V-cut. Practice both of these a lot, because the basis of these two cuts, when you get them under control with your tools, leads us into the other three cuts, which are variations on these two in various different combinations. Let me show you the V-cut a little differently, a little deeper too. I'm going to take this one, second one here, and I'm going to go in. There it is. Now I'm going to move the tool slightly to the right. Slightly to the right. Now what I have done is I've opened the V-cut up more, and I did that by doing precisely the same cut, but with the tool brought over, not rolled. Yes, you can roll it and do this, but don't start that. Keep it straight. If you look down here, the side I was cutting is really clean. That's across the end grain, and it's a clean cut. This side over here, where all the garbage wood went, not so clean. So let's clean it up. I'm going to switch to the other hand, do the same cut. And I can get a clean cut, and I can take care of the little garbage in the bottom. Now, I'm going to cut farther between centers because that'll bind. But let's take this little piece off so we can see what the end of this looks like. Let's hope that there's enough stiffness here for me to be able to make this cut. Okay, now if we can look at this end surface, this is end grain of wood, and I've been cutting across those fibers cleanly, and if you can see, that is really polished wood. It's probably not good enough on the camera, but trust me, it really is. I can now come in here and maybe clean up that little bottom right at the bottom. So if I'm making a tool, I may use the planing cuts to shape the length of the shaft for a handle. I can use tapers to get the shape of the tool. I might use V-cuts for decorative marks. And at the very end of the tool, where it's going to be extremely hard to sand, I'll use a combination of V-cuts to trim that end off. And so this is a end cut done by simply the V-cut. Can I take more off? Now, did you see me do that? I started here at the top, and I'm using this long point, and I simply roll the tool down towards the center. Use this kind of motion moving in towards the center. And I've got the same cut again. Now I stopped short, and you can see what the waste wood is looking like. It's very thin. I only moved over maybe a 64th of an inch at the most. If I move too far over, I just simply start another V-cut. And this wood on this side here will not flake off. There's too much mass over here. So you only have to take a little tiny bite, very thin. Slowly does it. And we end up with this nice smooth surface and a cut that is pretty doggone thin, 1/64 of an inch at the most. So if you're finding it's not cutting off, it's because you've gone and taken too deep of a cut. Planing cuts first, V cuts second. Take a small piece of wood and work on that for a while until you feel that you can do that comfortably with this tool, and then you pick up this tool and you see if I can do it with my other tools or however many tools you got. Know that as you get down towards the center of this piece of wood, the surface of the wood moving past the cutting edge is slower and slower and slower. So when I'm getting a really great cut starting here, the closer I get to the center, the longer it's going to take. So have patience and don't push through. Allow the wood to cut freely. Planing cuts, V cuts. Let's do one other cut with this piece. Put it back between centers just for fun. I'll pick up whatever tool just happened to be laying here. Oop, look at there, I'm way off center. I pushed it out of alignment. So guess what? I have to bring it back into smoothness again. That's a planing cut. That does it. So planing cuts are useful all the time. I'm going to show you what's a couple of V cuts here. I'm going to come over here and do a couple of V cuts. Now you see what I'm doing next. I'm beginning to roll the tool slightly when I'm doing that V cut. This is going to take some real practice. I'm doing the V cut, but I'm also making sure that that little tiny corner of the tool is always against the wood surface. And as the surface becomes not vertical, I have to move the tool over to stay in touch and farther and farther. And what's this beginning to look like is a really clean cut, but also I made that look easy. Trust me, it's not going to be that easy until you practice. That's half a bead. So I have taken the tool, taken my V cut, and rolled into it here. And this is number 3. This is a V cut leading into a bead. So now let's do the other side of that same bead. I'm going to establish where it's going to be. I'm going to do it left-handed. Can I do all my skew work right-handed? As long as I want to go this way, I can. What if I want to go this way? I've got to change hands. There is no right-handed skew cut. There is no left-handed skew cut. There is the appropriate hand for what you need to do. You've got to be ambidextrous with this tool. No choice. Left side. Now my bead, I just took a little tiny corner off. This is sort of like a plane, isn't it? Little tiny cuts. Each time I'm rolling it a little farther. And at the bottom I'm going to be straight vertical. Don't have the shape right. So the trick is to always keep that edge against the wood as you cut. And what happens if you turn it too far? Well, let me do it. See if I can do it. And I'm coming along here doing really good, and all of a sudden, I lost it. I got the edge away from the wood and it pulled right out. The bottom of that bead, that tool is going to be vertical, just like that. This is a very difficult cut to master, and probably one of the more difficult ones to get. So what you're going to have to do is practice a lot. Do your planing cuts, do your V cuts, and then start practicing beads. And my left hand is keeping this tool tight against that wood so I don't let it slide off. And that surface is almost polished. Almost polished. Go in the other direction. Now I'm going to see if I can get a catch. There. That's what's going to happen as you practice. And when you look at this really close, I've got a great spiral cut in here. It's pretty deep and it's pretty terrible, and in this case I'm not going to be able to save that bead. But what happened was, as I was following around this surface, I turned the tool too much, and instead of rubbing that bevel right there, I engaged the whole edge, and it literally pulled the tool back along. So that is one of the things that you're going to find in working with a skew is, oh, come on, I'm trying to, there we go. If you get it turned too far, the edge will engage and you'll end up with a spiral cut. So this is a catch, and I'll tell you what it means. If you look down and see that it is a spiral cut, that means that you engage the edge. You had turned the tool too much, too much. The other kind of catch we get is typically not on small pieces, but on larger pieces, where we end up getting the top corner. Oh, I can't do it. It'll catch in the wood. This is too narrow for me to actually make this happen. And it'll pull out a divot. Imagine playing golf and hitting a shot down the fairway. That's the kind of divot you're going to get. This tip has dug under the surface and ripped out some wood. Well, unlike golf, you can't replace it here. You're going to have to plane it back down again. So I can clean this up. How? Planing cut. And this bead over here, I doubt if I can save it. But I can make some cuts on it. So, good thing to practice with is smaller stuff. Once you get up to a piece that's much larger diameter, you're going to run into more and more issues. And the issues are catches will happen more frequently. So if you're a pen turner or have ever turned pens, working with pen blanks is a good size stock to work with. I just dropped my sample piece. Let's take this out, put in another piece. You can do this between centers, but I've done it this way because it's convenient to grab these and come up to center. It's on center. Nice and snug. Nice and snug. Now, I said roughing out with the skew chisel for larger pieces is a little problematic. That's true. Now also, if I was going to rough it out on this one with this little tool, I'm going to get a catch almost for certain, because that corner is going to catch. There's too small of a working edge. So for doing a rough out, I have a tendency to want to use a wider tool, this way. And this is where the radius tools come, because as I plane across here, this heel and this toe are curved away from the wood, and they're not going to engage near as much. And to hear that big piece come off of there, that's one of the reasons why I suggest on larger stock, do not do it with the skew chisel. Do not do it with the skew chisel. Go to a more traditional way of rounding that out until you get a nice stock. plane this down and make it nice and smooth. This is a skew chisel with that radius tip, the one I started to use a minute ago. And I've got a fairly nice looking surface. So use this to finish up your planing out cuts. So we've talked about V cuts, we've talked about planing cuts, and I've shown you some practice cuts of beads on very small stock, which is the place to start. But also I'm going to show you a way of taking the stock down to a smaller diameter very rapidly. It's called a peel cut. And a peel cut is taken with the tool laying flat on the tool rest like this. The long point leads in, and I'm going to roll down, and it's going to make a really ugly looking cut, but it's going to get rid of a lot of wood real fast. So it's laying on the tool rest, and we'll push in. See me rolling? And what I have done here is taken away a lot of stock. This is not a finished surface at all. It is the shape of that tip. And so I've taken away a lot of stock very rapidly, and I've left a not a very nice looking surface. I'm leading with the long point. The tool is flat on the tool rest like that. Now, how do I clean this up? Well, I'm going to have to go back to my planing cut. Now, because of this corner, I have a hard time getting it in there, but I can. Peel cut. Flat on the tool rest, lead with a long point. As I lift the tool, I have to advance it, heading towards the center, always aiming towards the center. If I just roll it over, I'm going to go from cutting to scraping. And I'm not talking to you about scraping with this tool at all today. So let me do this one more time. Tips in the wood, and I'm moving towards the center. The handle's coming up. The tool is moving in. One more time. Handle's coming up. Tool is moving in, and I'm aiming that tip always along the surface towards the center. Now the surface is not too bad, but that's not a good surface. That needs another bit of work. This end down here is a little rough. Let's cut this off and finish this up down here. I'm going to make this go away. So don't want to bind. Now, let's clean this up down here. Maybe my peel cut to get rid of the mass here. Going towards the center. Turns much more slowly in the center. Aiming at the center. Now, I almost made a mistake there. I went too far, and actually down near the very center I got underneath the fiber. So of course it's not going to cut at all there. I've got to be on it, aiming towards that center. One last cut. I'm going to take it all the way down, and you can watch the tool aiming towards the center. Handle's coming up, blade's going in. And I missed the center. I missed the center because I went too low again. Okay, plain V bead peel. That's 4 out of 5 so far. I'm going to use this one, but before I do it, let me hone it a little bit. It's been used for a few minutes. This is a straight edge. This is one of these diamond cards. This is 600 mesh grit. So I'm going to lay it here on the heel, bring it up to the edge. A few strokes. The other side. These come in all sorts of different meshes. I have found what's called fine or red colored or 600 grit to be the one that I most prefer. So let's get ready to clean this up a little bit. Let me sharpen up a couple more tools and I'll be right back. Okay, I've got another one. I just honed that. This is a radius skew. The process is exactly the same. Anchor the tool on the thing, bring it up to the bevel, and now, as I come around, all I've got to do with my left hand is to rock that tool. Turn it over, bevel, edge. There's the engagement, and I'm just simply rocking the tool like this with my other hand. I've done many demonstrations where I have had no sharpening equipment available, and these tools, these cards, which are always in my pocket, they're always there. That's like a razor. Now, when you get a tool that's very, very sharp, you'll lose the edge much more rapidly. If the edge was blunt like this, like an axe, it doesn't get real sharp, but it doesn't change its sharpness very rapidly. As we become much more acute, that edge gets sharper and we lose it faster. Imagine a chef's knife, how fine that edge is, and how many times that chef is going to his stone or steel to tune that back up again. It's because that goes away. So constantly keep an eye on the edge of your tools. Okay. One last cut. Well, here's our piece. And we got this down by doing a peel cut. You know, I'm doing about 1/8 of an inch. If I went in here for half a tool width, well, on this particular piece of wood, it's a soft wood and it's fairly short stock. It's working okay, but can you hear the vibration? It's too wide. That's not a good cut. So take small cuts and take several. Now, I have a surface on the end. There's a little torn grain in there. And I'd like to have a nice, smooth end. So I'm going to show you an end cut. That was a little scrape on the corner just to clean that fuzz off of there. The end cut is this way. I just hit my finger with the edge of that tool and I got to check to see whether I cut it or not. That's pretty sharp. I'm going to stand the tool up like I did the V-cut. And I am going to make a cut all the way into the center. Now the trick on this is to never let this tool ride flat against that end. I have to have some clearance. I need maybe 1 or 2 degrees. In other words, I need to be able to see between this tip and the shaft. I need to be able to see some light. Let me make one and then we'll talk about it. Really good. Now, what do I get? I get a glass-like surface. That's what I get. I have a piece of wood here that is end grain, and I do not have to sand it. Now, if I let that whole edge touch, I'm going to get a catch. I want the tip, basically this little millimeter down here, to touch, and I want the rest of this tool to be basically like that, but only maybe 1 degree. I want to be able to look down here and see air, light, between the shaft and the wood. If I don't, I'll get a catch, almost certainly. I'm going to start right here in the corner. Now, that's not working very well. The reason is, you can see now how deep it's going. It's too deep. Let's clean it off. Peel cut. Now, just like the peel cut, this corner is rolling towards the center. If you could see this up close, you would see that this whole tool is covered with dust except for a little tiny triangle right on the tip of that tool. And that is the only part of the tool that has touched the wood. Just that little triangle. And we get a nice surface. An end cut. I'm going to go in about a 32nd of an inch. As I get down towards the center, remember it works slower. And that's an end cut. Can I use the skew chisel for other things like opening cans and stirring paint? Yeah. I can also use it as a scraper. And if I had a knot on the wood like this that was not planing very smoothly, it'd be pretty easy. Not with a flat one, but with a radiused one to come in here with the tool flat on the tool rest and scrape back over top of that knot to take out roughness that might not disappear other ways. I can see where I scraped from here to here. The knot is smooth, but the fibers, the long fibers on either side of the knot are not as smooth as they were before. So, with your skew chisels, whether they're small or large, get a small piece of wood, put it in your chuck, plane it, V-cuts, plain V-cuts, plain V-cuts. And then take that V-cut and start rolling one side to the other and making beads. Start with small stock, it's going to make a huge difference. Then gauge up to something a little larger, and then maybe larger still as you need to. The practice, plain, V-cut, combination of the plain and V, which is the bead, peel cut for removing stock fast, and end cuts for finishing off the end of a piece so we have a nice smooth end grain surface. 5 cuts for the skew chisel. A chance for you to begin to develop skills with one of the most versatile tools in your tool chest. And it needs practice. And every tool you have, every skew you have, will need equal amount of practice because they all will behave somewhat differently. So until we see you again, get out some wood, go in the shop, start making some cuts with your skew. We'll see you later.